Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. On today's episode, I will be targeting late summer black bass from a kayak. I am targeting a very small weedy lake known as Rancho Seco Park Lake. The goal today is to fish the offshore grass for black bass. I find that especially when I'm fishing from a kayak, the bigger and better bass will be often offshore in whatever vegetation is left. Starting off the day, I like to target the offshore grass with a Zoom Magnum curly tail worm, and I will be fishing this on a 7'3" Dobbin Sierra casting medium heavy rod. I have 30-pound Power Pro to a 15-pound fluorocarbon leader. I really like to target the offshore grass with a curly tail worm, especially those in the 12-inch or bigger class. I really like the Zoom series because it is cheap and affordable. I have this big worm rigged Texas rig, and I'm using a 3/0 O'Hennessy style hook. I'm also using a 1/2 ounce bullet sinker pegged so that way I can move this worm through the grass. All I'm doing is giving this worm gentle hops along the grass, and every time it gets stuck, I will pull gently or hop it out of the grass. A big worm is one of my favorite ways to target offshore bass, especially from these weedy reservoirs. I ended up getting bit, and I knew right away that this was a pretty decent little bass. He's not big by any metric or standard, but I'm happy that now I've gotten a bite, and I know now that there are fish holding on this offshore grass. The depth so far is roughly about 13 feet. Despite this worm being almost the size of the bass, these fish will still readily take, especially during the middle part of summer into late summer. I find that I get the best success when targeting offshore bass with these bigger soft plastics. I'll show this fish to you guys real quick before returning him back to the water. Alright buddy, thanks for playing, and off you go. This time of year, an angler will have two groups of fish to target. There will be some shallow water fish, and there will be some offshore fish. Whenever I'm fishing from a watercraft, such as a kayak or even an aluminum boat, I like to fish for the offshore fish. I find that the offshore fish will often not get as much fishing pressure as those that are nearer to the bank. More times than not, if I were to pinpoint the offshore fish on whatever grass is left out on the deeper end of the margin, I can often get much better fish. I ended up getting bit the moment I dragged this worm up and above the margin, and I knew right away that this was a much better fish. A lot of times whenever I'm targeting fish from the bank, I find that these offshore fish will be very hard to target from the bank. But if I'm on a watercraft such as a kayak, I'll have a lot much more option, especially when fishing from a watercraft, and my choices will be a lot much more varied versus targeting these fish from the bank. This was a very nice black bass, probably about 3 pounds, but I'll take what I can get. This fish was a little bit too big to boat flip, so I went down and I got him. This was a very healthy fish, very chunky and full of colors nonetheless. I'll show him to you guys real quick, and I'll return him back to the water. Alright buddy, thanks for playing, and off you go as well. So what do I exactly mean when I say that the grass on the shore is dying? Well, for the most part, an angler can observe that the vegetation near the bank will often have this very brown color. This brown color is an indication that the vegetation is kind of dying. So what this will do is a lot of bass, especially those that are in these weedy reservoirs, will tend to try and move offshore toward greener grass. And this is what I'm looking for. It doesn't really have to be deep, but it just has to be roughly anywhere around 10 to 15 feet. This reservoir will often have bluegills and such as its main forage near these offshore grass. I ended up getting bit the moment I popped this worm up and over some vegetation. This was a pretty little decent bass, not big, but I'll take what I can get, especially for the late summer period as I am fishing currently as we are in now. Despite this fish just being barely bigger than the worm, he still was pretty aggressive and managed to get hooked. I find that during the late summer period, as the water temperature is extremely warm, these fish will still attempt to attack the worm. I'll show him to you guys real quick, and I'll prep him for release. Alright buddy, rest up a bit, and he was ready to go. By far the most popular technique at this reservoir, especially for many a watercraft angler, is to fish a drop shot. But I find that as we approach middle of summer and late summer, These fish will have a much higher metabolism and will be willing to strike at a lot much bigger lures. I actually prefer to fish Magnum style soft plastics over trying to present a small finesse bait like a drop shot worm. This is just my preference though. Some anglers will still prefer to finesse fish offshore, but my preference is to present a much bigger soft plastic. One key factor I've noticed at these particularly weedy reservoirs or ponds is, especially during the late part of summer, many of these black bass will hold tightly to greener grass versus the brown grass. This is just an observation of mine, especially when I'm out here on a kayak or a smaller watercraft. I've noticed that I will get a lot much more bites on the green grass. I ended up getting bit, and I knew right away that this wasn't a big fish by any metric or standard, yet somehow he still managed to attack the giant worm. Today I got surface temperatures of 79 degrees, so therefore I think a lot of these fish are going to be holding tight to grass. Therefore, that is my strategy today. I will target this offshore grass, whereas a lot of anglers will try and target near the bank. This little guy wasn't letting go of this worm, despite the worm being almost the same size as this fish. I'll show him to you guys real quick, and it will be just a quick release. As the middle of the day approaches, my preference will now change to targeting this very much deeper grass with the free rig. I will be fishing this free rig on a 7'6" medium heavy casting rod, a Shimano Zodius with a Shimano Curado 70 XG. I really like the high gear ratio because this will allow me to pop this free rig aggressively through the grass. I have this free rig rigged with a half-ounce cylinder style tungsten sinker and with a Strike King Rage Bug. I really like the Magnum size, especially for late summer or middle of summer. I ended up getting bit, and I knew right away that this was actually a pretty decent bass. Where the free rig really excel is either early spring or late into the summer period. What I find is with the free rig I can present a bait, a really big bait in particular, with a very heavy sinker, and this will drop nicely through into the vegetation, and this will often trigger quite a bit of bites as it's descending through the water column. This wasn't a very big fish, but I'll show him to you guys real quick because he is very healthy and full of colors. Again, I'm not looking for any trophies today, but I'm just happy to get whatever I can get. Alright buddy, off you go. With this heavy free rig, all I am doing is giving this rig a cast as far as I can, and I'm going to let it hit the bottom. Whenever it hits the bottom, I'm going to let the line out, and then I'm going to pop it aggressively. What this will do is allow the sinker to quickly ascend and descend, thus letting the bait slowly trail as it falls down the water column. I find that this will often trigger quite a bit of bites. I really like to fish this rig during the early spring period or the middle and late summer period. This rig is extremely effective when targeting bass in all columns of water. More times than not, I find that if a bass were to be around, I will get bit the moment the bait descends towards the bottom. The free rig can also be tuned according to the season. Earlier in the season, especially early spring and spring, I really like to use much smaller baits and a sinker, whereas when the water gets warmer during the middle of summer or late summer, I really like to use much bigger soft plastics and a much heavier sinker to get down into the water column. I ended up getting bit, and this bass was really holding tight to the green grass down there. As I've mentioned in the past, I really like to fish the free rig over the Tokyo rig. The free rig is not fixed, unlike the Tokyo rig, which will have the sinker fixed to the hook. When a bass picks up this bait, more times than not an angler will feel a thump, or sometimes the bait will just feel as if it just disappeared. So hopefully today's episode explained my take on how I would break down these weedy reservoirs if I were to be on a watercraft. I know that a lot of my old-time subscribers that were with me at the beginning when this channel was made often had asked me whether or not I'd quit the bass fishing, and for the most part I did not quit the bass fishing. A little history about this channel itself. Originally, when I moved over from an eastern platform to this western platform, this channel was very much black bass based. But as time went on, somehow this channel managed to accrue quite a bit of Western audience, and I never thought the day that this channel was going to accrue a Western audience. For the most part, I am not just the black bass fisherman. I have my origins in the black bass fishing game, but I'm also a very passionate multi-species fisherman. When I was younger, I was all about the black bass fishing, but as I grew older, I had a great opportunity to travel the country, and I ended up learning to appreciate other species of fish other than the black bass. So hopefully this explains to a lot of my OG subscribers and some of my Eastern subscribers whom followed me from my Eastern platform to this Western YouTube platform of what has happened as this channel had grown. This wasn't a very big fish, but I'll take whatever I can get today, especially for the later part of summer, and especially since today is almost 90+ degrees. This bass was rather lanky, but I'll show him to the camera nonetheless. He still managed to pick up this Magnum Rage bug. For a late summer bass, he's kind of skinny. I was hoping he'd be a little bit bigger, but I'll show him to you guys, and I'll let him rest up a bit before off he goes. Hopefully my earlier explanation will thoroughly explain why I haven't put a lot of black bass fishing content on this channel. Growing up, I did a lot of bass fishing, especially when I entered my college years. I also did a lot of college bass fishing. I guess what I'm trying to say is at the end of the day, it ended up not being exactly my passion. Even though I do still enjoy bass fishing here and there, my passion truly is multi-species fishing. Whether it be a coarse fish species like a carp, or whether it be catfish, or even a 5-inch trout from a mountain stream, or a 10-pound planter trout in a giant reservoir, I'm just happy to catch them all. This fish wasn't exactly a big fish, but he fought pretty well, and I think he might be actually bigger than that other fish, so I will take what I can get. Surprisingly, as he got closer, this fish was actually much better than I anticipated. I think he was trailing the bait for quite a bit before he ended up committing to grabbing the bait, because I barely caught him in the corner of the mouth. He's not big, I'll show him to you guys real quick before putting him back in the water. This was a very healthy late summer bass nonetheless. Alright buddy, off you go. So I've noticed that there was this little open patch in the middle of this deep weed bed, and I'm going to try and target this very deep weed bed, which is roughly about 18 feet in depth. The moment the free rig landed inside this open hole, I ended up getting bit. Somehow I knew that this fish wasn't exactly big, but I was just pleasantly surprised that there was a fish down there. For the most part, a lot of the fish that I ended up picking up today were in roughly about 12 to 13 feet of water, so to see a fish that was down there roughly about 18 feet of water was quite a bit of a surprise, and he was very dark, telling me that he was really down there in the grass. Wind was starting to pick up pretty bad, and it was getting pretty miserable trying to keep the kayak steady as I went around casting, so I will see if I can catch one more fish before calling it quits for the day and begin my pedal back to the launch ramp. There is currently a golden mussel closure at this reservoir as well, so there are no motorized vessels on a trailer allowed to be launched. The only anglers out here are the kayak anglers and a handful of guys whom are launching those little porta boats off the back of their truck beds. The fishing pressure, in my opinion, had been quite light, especially with the golden mussel closure. A lot of anglers are now stuck to the reservoirs that they have their boats or watercraft banded to, but being on a kayak, I am not restricted like those guys. I ended up getting bit, and I knew right away that this actually was a much better fish. I was just rather happy that I ended up hooking into quite a handful of fish today despite the conditions that I was given. The wind today was actually quite bad, and while filming this episode, I ended up drifting quite a bit, thus needing to pedal quite a bit back and forth to get a decent fishing angle in order to film this episode. I'll get this fish unhooked and I'll show him to you guys real quick because he was actually quite a very nice bass. This was another very healthy largemouth bass, full fin and full of colors. He's not very lanky or scrawny, so I'm happy that I ended up hooking it to him. Alright buddy, off you go. Overall, it was just a great day out on the water. I caught a handful of fish for the camera, despite it being the doldrums of summer currently. And thank you guys so much for watching. So until next time, tight lines y'all.